there's these three big movements happening right now, and I would really love to see all of them kind of come to fruition. And one of them is the more church based model. One of them is the more, not really like recreational, but this like, hey, I'm an adult. And because I'm an adult, I get to do what I want with my consciousness. And if that's, use psilocybin, that's use psilocybin. And then there's this clinical model that, ketamine is spearheading, the MDMA and psilocybin research is really spearheading. And I think there's room for all three of them. What I would love to see is over the next 15, 20 years that not only medicine and mental health completely turn on their head and start getting real results that include real healing and not just these band-aid dulling sort of pharmaceutical drugs, but that also society really gets turned on its head in a really potent and powerful and enlightening way.
Hi everyone, welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. Today I have with me Kevin, Cannella, and Yana Grama. Thank you both for being with us. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And traditionally, we always love to know more about your background. So I will be saying a few lines from both of your bios, and then we can dive into our conversation. Kevin is a mystic at heart, a psychotherapist by trade, an entrepreneur by calling, and a psychonaut in spirit. Kevin, this was like the best bio that I came across. I was just saying earlier, this is so poetic. It's just so beautiful. Just wanted to say that. And you are the co-founder and the executive director of Thank You Life, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that exists to expand access to psychedelic therapy by eliminating financial barriers to treatment, by providing grants for people who would otherwise not have access to treatment. Thank You Life is on a mission to revolutionize mental health care and participate in helping the world to heal. And Yana, you are an executive vice president and founder of New Earth, with Harry, founded in 2004 and played a key role in growing Thank You Life organization.
Growing New Earth.
New Earth. Oh, New Earth. Apologies, New Earth. From a vision to the impactful nonprofit that you are today, having served more than 20,000 young people in Los Angeles County. Prior to New Earth, you developed a business acumen in the consumer product and personal growth industries, managing and scaling organizations, building, leading, and training teams, and being involved in all areas of business development, from marketing to sales to administration. And you are also Roberts Enterprise Development Fund Fellow. This is beautiful and amazing. So what I'm really interested in first is to learn more about your stories. What brings you to this work?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Please.
So yeah, as I was saying, or as you read, I'm a psychotherapist by calling. Spent a lot of my 20s really diving into my own spiritual journey, and that happened to include a lot of psychedelics, and so that's really where like the psychedelic piece of everything came from. And a little ways into that journey, I was trying to figure out how to get my career going and really activate things like abundance and purpose and service. And that led me to going to school to study psychotherapy and become a therapist. And that was something that I had found so much benefit from. And so I was really just looking to, help others in a way that I've been helped. And my interest was was really there in the sort of inner child work and all the different kind of work I had been doing. Um, yeah, and after I graduated, I eventually got into my own private practice and was able to, yeah, get into ketamine work. And because of my background with psychedelics, psychedelic therapy had always been on my mind, and I had been tracking the MDMA research trials that were happening. And then, really, when I graduated from Naropa University, I found out about ketamine really being the version of psychedelic therapy that's here today, that's legal and above ground today. And yeah, so as quickly as I could, I really jumped into that space. And um, yeah, I took on a supervisor who was a ketamine therapist and did some trainings, did a somatic training, did a ketamine training, and really brought it into my practice. And at that time, really very quickly, me and all my colleagues began to see how expensive this work was. And so we would just be talking about, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was some sort of fund that we could just plug into to get all these people help? Because we were just limited. We could take some sliding scale clients, but it was super limited. We still needed to make a living. And there was just inevitably people that, on one hand, still couldn't afford our sliding scale, even at the low end. And even beyond that, there was just like, most of us could probably have full practices of people completely on sliding scale, and we'd still be full. So, we saw quickly just how much need there was for this work, and that there was just a big gap between, us making a living and getting the people the help that they needed. Yeah. So I won't go on too much longer, but yeah, that eventually led me to just say yes to starting something like this and seeing what we could do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And Yana, what brings you to this work?
Sure. So, I know you read my bio, which is very cut and dry, but my whole life I've been a seeker and a seer. And when we started New Earth 20 years ago, we actually, our mission is to serve at promise youth. But when we began, we really served the whole community. And we were doing alternative medicine and healing festivals called Good Medicine. You didn't even know this, Kevin, back in the day. Just bringing together practitioners that, in 2008 in LA, it was still very different to bring, forth different types of healing modalities, from acupuncture to Mongolian skin rolling to sound therapy and all kinds of different things, to really teach people how to heal themselves, naturally. And, through the years, we really honed our mission into serving young people, but we've always been at the heart of it, really looking at how do we serve young people to heal themselves and heal their traumas. And so we work with kids that are at risk and at promise, we like to say in LA. But our kids are coming from, communities characterized by violence and trauma and abuse and just economic instability and poverty. And a lot of them end up in the juvenile justice system and the foster care system. And they have unbelievable, unimaginable trauma from a very, very early age. And we provide educational programs and arts programs and mentorship and lots of very traditional support. But we, connected with Thank You Life, and my husband, Harry, and I, who founded New Earth, met Dr. Dan, who's one of the founders, a few years ago. And we started doing medicine work with him when we were actually dealing with a lot of things within our own organization, just trying to find our own bliss and our own healing. And the work we did with him was so profound, and we just knew we needed to bring access to communities that don't necessarily have access, specifically our youth and their families. And, we saw what a profound change this work had in our own lives. We were able to afford it, and we thought, like, wow, what would it be like if we could bring this work to those that couldn't afford it and really make it accessible? And so when Dan shared the vision for Thank You Life with us, and asked if we would become a fiscal sponsor when they were just getting off the ground, we said, absolutely. We ran it by our board, and our board was super excited. And yeah, and then I joined the board of Thank You Life, and it's been a really beautiful journey. And we've got, a young person we've already put through the program, and we have another one who's going to be being put through the program, and it's profoundly impactful. I mean, we've actually seen the work, and it is incredible. And what can happen in a matter of weeks that couldn't be done in years is incredible. So, yeah.
This is so wonderful. I want to thank you, both of you, for really stepping into this front line of this kind of work. What I find in my own area as well, from, over here across the pond, is working with young people is so rewarding. I feel like in the psychedelic space, because young people don't carry a lot of baggage. I know they are traumatized and they have so much going on in their lives, but I feel like they are more open than a grown-up or somebody in their later life.
Yeah.
Or do you find the similar patterns as well?
Absolutely.
And also, yeah, what age are we talking about when you say young people?
Yeah. So we work with teens and young adults. So 13 to 25 essentially is sort of the age group. They're considered TAY youth, transitional age youth. So they're transitioning from, childhood, teenhood to young adulthood to adulthood. And during that time, I mean, obviously there's been so much research done on brain development, and sort of all the synapses aren't completely closed yet, right? So there's literally, they're open-minded because their brain is still open and still developing those neural pathways. And so, exactly what you said, Susan, is that, they are so much more open and so much more fertile when it comes to this work, when it comes to change, when it comes to the capacity for healing and the capacity for growth, because they're still young and their brain is still developing. So this is the time to really, really create and connect with them.
Wow, this is so wonderful. So what does a typical process looks like if a young person came into your care? What does that look like for our listeners to get a really clear idea and picture?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, for us, and I'll let Kevin maybe talk about how Thank You Life is involved, but for us, a young person can come to us in many different ways. So we actually started our work in 2004 in the youth probation camps. They're called camp, but they're not Camp Snoopy. They're literally youth prisons. So, in the United States, we incarcerate young people still. Young people as young as 12. They are locked up in incarceration behind, prison, maximum security, shackled, all the things, jumpsuits, everything you can imagine. Oftentimes they're there for status offenses, which is usually something like getting a D on a report card or truancy because they can't get to school or it's not safe to get to school. So young people either come to us when they're released from incarceration, or some just come to us because they're enrolled in schools that are failing them, underperforming schools, under-resourced schools. They're gang involved. They're in communities that aren't safe. So there's lots of different reasons why they come to us. So they enroll in school. We have a high school diploma program on site, and we have job programs. So we actually provide a living wage so they can work and they could go to school. And then they have a clinical team, case managers that are assigned to them, and therapists that are working to support them through their process. So, providing therapy sessions, providing access to care, access to referrals to housing. We provide grocery assistance. We provide rental assistance, monetary rental assistance. We have arts programs, creative writing and music and poetry and dance. And we have a studio on site. So a young person is once they're enrolled in New Earth, they have access to all these programs. And then, through the support of Thank You Life, if they're eligible and they're ready, then they have access to alternative integrative care, through psychedelic medicine.
Yeah, this is so profound. I'm so excited. And I think, yes, I do believe in the prevention, and I do believe in working with youngsters is this the most rewarding. And I think we need more of these kind of works. And I'm also aware of a lot of young or youth organizations in the UK, but obviously we cannot provide psychedelic-assisted therapy just yet. Even I know ketamine is out there already and it's legal. For our listeners as well, if they're first time stumbling upon this conversation, ketamine at the moment is legal everywhere. And I know that UK has clinics, but they are so expensive. I mean, it's impossible for any young person to afford those. And yeah, this is the dilemma. This is the challenge that we're all facing at the moment. And of course, now I want to turn to Kevin, and now working with ketamine, and hopefully the MDMA will be, it's lined up as I believe probably next year. It will be hopefully legal in terms of clinical use. What are your thoughts on working with the youth and the young people? How do you see your vision? How do you see this collaboration? I think you guys have found each other. It's a perfect match and beautiful collaboration I can see here. What are your thoughts, like a long-term vision, and how else can this be expanded and we can model, all over the world, like globally? Everyone's just all the eyes are on the psychedelic space now, and everyone's kind of wanting to train, become a psychedelic therapist, get involved somehow. But of course, you both have this incredible experience, background, foundation, and as a psychotherapist, Kevin, as you are. So if you could just give us your, overview or review of where do you see it, what would you advise? How can we all get involved? So that's what I want to know. How can we all get involved?
There's a lot there. The involvement, the vision. And let me just also, I just want to make a disclaimer too. So the people from New Earth that we're putting through are over 18.
Yes.
So at the moment,
I was going to say that too. Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So
Kevin.
just so that doesn't get muddled. So,
Yeah.
they can start working with New Earth at sounds like 12, 13 and do all this programming. And then, the one young man was 21 that we put through. The other one that we're looking to put through, I think, is about 24, 25 years old.
Yep.
And, it's still this stage that Yana's talking about where, the frontal lobe really doesn't finish forming fully until about 25 years old. And I think there is something really rich. And, my own intensive psychedelic healing started with ayahuasca down in Peru at 22 years old. And I think you're absolutely right. There's something really potent where it's different to have childhood trauma and then be 22 and jump into this work than have childhood trauma and then 40 years of adulthood where that trauma just gets solidified in different ways, and our coping mechanisms and our way, all that just gets solidified in certain ways. And I think it's just tougher to be in, say midlife and then try to unpack some of these things where, there's something just, we're still finding our way. We're still seeing what adulthood is going to look like, what our lifestyle is going to be like in adulthood, that I think can make it just, just better to get in there when someone's just emerging into adulthood. So you mentioned the vision, but then also this other piece. What do you want me to start with?
So let's start with the vision and the collaboration between, because I know, like I said, in the UK we have youth organizations, and I can't even imagine they are collaborating with another organization who can offer psychedelic-assisted therapy for youth. At the moment, I don't know if you guys are aware, but UK is quite reserved when it comes to jumping into, I feel like US is already really ready. It's almost like I look at different states, and I was there at the psychedelic conference, and the energy and the open-mindedness is far better than over here. So, and having this conversation with you, being in the UK, I really want to have your perspective, which you already said, it's easier to mold and help and shape, and because malleable, there's a malleable young person is ready to jump in, as opposed to someone who's had such a long life with suffering, pain, and reinforcement of that trauma experiences. So what I would like to hear from you is that how can we all get involved, and what are the ways that we could work through around the stigma or challenges, those kind of things. I'm also aware that these non-profit organizations can be very challenging to you know to find, to create and also run. They are quite challenging, I believe.
Yeah. So I think there's a wide variety of ways that people can get involved, with us and just with the larger movement too. And yeah, I guess that kind of goes a bit into like the vision and what this might look like over the next 5, 10, 20 years. Um, on one hand, if somebody listening to this is interested, feel free to reach out to us through our website, thankyoulife.org. And we could always use more volunteers and people reaching out. And you know, uh, there's this thing too where we also just need donations. So the way we run is mostly donation based, and so when there's um, when we support someone to get ketamine assisted psychotherapy, it's all from donations that we've received from really people paying it forward. We find that people who've had their own really impactful psychedelic experience, and if they have some extra income, they're able to give to us. That's really been the main, people who have given and are trying to pay this work forward. So, if you or anyone who's in that camp, you can become a monthly donor. You can reach out to us for more information about what we do and how to become a donor. You can also just donate on our website. Yeah, and if you're more interested in the industry and how to actually work in the industry, I would say, yeah, reach out, and you could potentially volunteer with us. And I think depending on what kind of where people are at in life, there's we're definitely still I think Rick Doblin from MAP said something like he wants to train 10,000 psychedelic therapists over the next 10 years or however long. So that is definitely an avenue. I would say, explore counseling programs, masters in counseling programs, masters in social work programs for those kind of things. You can also explore becoming a psychologist or an MD. I think this sort of psychedelic renaissance has been so powerful and been taken so seriously because, similar to my co-founder, Dr. Dan, and I'm a licensed counselor. He's a doctor. He's an MD. He's a psychiatrist. And it's been, I think the old view of psychedelics was, these like hippy dippy people who don't really have jobs or anything. And now I feel like this movement is being pushed forward by psychiatrists and therapists. And I just think that is incredible. So I would say that that's one thing to go encourage people. But to be honest, there's so much space in this industry for, whether it's lawyers, just, business people, accountants. There's plenty of space for all different sorts of, skill sets too.
I love that. There's a really good way to get involved. I believe, education and also studying and getting these certification programs. There's so many different organizations providing education. I mean, MAPS being one of the leading, and it's been there for forever. They've been around forever. So Kevin, you talked about it's at the moment you are providing ketamine. Is it likely that you'll be moving into different sort of medicines as they become more legal and more available? Or is it something specific about ketamine that you guys prefer? Or is it just literally the legal landscape that we need to be careful around?
Yeah, so we absolutely intend to move into MDMA and psilocybin as they become federally legal in the US. And that's just a big distinction that we need to hold to. And so, we're hoping that MDMA will get a rescheduling here in the next couple of years. Although I know a lot of us have been waiting a long time for that to happen. And yeah, in the meantime, we're here working with ketamine, and I think it's a great starter. In some ways, I think it's great, not only for our organization, but just for society, that we all get to start with ketamine before we roll out anything else, kind of, nationwide or society wide or anything like this. Um, I think for the most part, it's a bit easier to work with. And it's also shorter acting. It just seems like a, a good baby step for our organization, but again, just kind of society wide before we get into something more intense like MDMA or psilocybin.
Yeah, amazing. And what does it look like for a young person to experience ketamine, for example, for the first time? What does that look like? And what does it entail? And how do they go about the process and the integration? I believe, Yana, you come in here with your integration support, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, the process is we have an amazing clinic that Thank You Life has connected us with. They have therapists that are very representative of the youth that we serve. So, our young people can sort of see themselves in the therapists. Many of them are people of color, just like our young people, have dealt with a lot of the same life circumstances as our young people have. So there's this space of safety and comfort. Because, let's face it, there is stigma around these types of medicines, lots of stigma, especially within our communities, just because it isn't widely known, it's not accessible. So there's lots of question marks. So oftentimes a young person comes into it open and trusting of new earth, first and foremost, but also not, sometimes with a little bit of trepidation and fear. So we come in, either myself or my husband, the co-founder partner, comes with the young person, and will come with them for the first session, and just be with them, and just sort of allow them to be in that space. I mean, we're not there in the room when it's happening, but there's a lot of trust with the therapist that is there. And they come in, and I think the first session is always very surprising, because they don't necessarily know what to expect. But that moment when the thoughts are quieted, right, and they can finally breathe, and they can finally be still, and they can finally be with themselves, the themselves that's within, that they can never access, is magical. And then they come back for more sessions and get more of that. And it's an unfolding. It's like an onion being peeled, layer by layer. And it's incredible. And, when they come back into their own lives, they have a new way of dealing with life, with stress, with circumstances, and with all the things that seemed so overwhelming in the past and so unmanageable in the past. They now have this unique sense of peace and calmness. A lot of our kids, they're always looking over their shoulder. They're always watching their back. They're always on high alert. There's always some kind of thing that they're waiting to be attacked by. And so this work allows them to just breathe and release.
Wow.
There's let me just piggyback on that. Yeah, Yana, I'm just reminded of something that you were sharing about the young man that went through, and how I think you were really talking about like his stress tolerance, essentially, and how how much his stress tolerance expanded from this work. And I think you were saying to him that, something had even happened earlier that day, but he still had a smile on his face, and just how new that was for you to just even witness him like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a young man that, has dealt with unimaginable trauma in his life, and has been in the system, and has been in foster care, and has been in the court system, all the systems. And his sort of go-to reaction in the past has always been just high level of stress, especially with the smallest stressors. because it's just everything. It's constantly piling up, piling up, piling up. And while doing this work, I noticed that, he was dealing with some big life things, not little things, but some big life things. And he just always had this smile on his face. And I always chuckled internally because I'm like, I know why he has this smile on his face. And then, I talked to him about it. I was like, what's going on? And he shared with me what was going on. So I'm like, big life stuff, and I was like, wow, I'm just witnessing how you just got the smile on your face. And he's like, yeah, I mean, it's not that big of a deal, And that right there is just such a great representation of the impact of this work and how needed it is in our communities and how needed it is with the people that experience the highest level of trauma.
Yeah. Well, so beautiful. I can listen to you all day, Yana. I can see your passion and your care around these young people. So how do you navigate the stigma around, recommending or, having a young person to go through the treatment through Thank You Life? Like, what does that look like? Do you feel worried? Do you feel like you'll be judged, or like, how does that process look like? What does it look like?
Great question. Really good question. So it's all very new right now for us. So as I mentioned, we've had one young man and now we're going to have two. And the second young man is basically the reason why he's doing it is because he saw the change in the first young man. And he's dealing with lots of things too. And I was ready. A lot of it is it's very prescriptive for us. It's not cookie cutter by any means. And it's not that, oh, hey, this is something we offer. It's very much by invitation only. And it's for young people that we know have gone through our work. I mean, both of these young men, they've gone through all of our work. They've gone through all of our programs. They're now employees at the organization. So they just have to be in a space where we know they're ready for now. I think as this grows and expands and there's more young people that go through and there's more funding that comes through, we'll probably have a more scientific process in how we're putting them through. But right now it's very much about an invitation only, comes from myself or my husband or a few other folks like therapists, that know that this is something that's being offered. And so it hasn't been organizationally wide, like announced. While our board of directors is 100% on board, they know what we're doing. They know our support with Thank You Life. They know we've been their fiscal sponsor. Right now we're it's newly navigating these waters,
Yeah, absolutely. So what about is there any plans of like creating maybe a young community for the young ones? Because, there's a lot of people that out there talk about the integration should be like holding community, holding, like gathering them together so that they can speak to each other and have that kind of integration support. Because sometimes when it's so clinical and so medicalized, it can be quite lonely for them. Because I read a lot of research papers, and we have a lot over here in the UK. Those who were even participated in the trials, they always felt a bit lonely afterwards. So I'm sure it's all going to develop organically, but what are your thoughts on the community aspect for the young people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is developing organically. As I mentioned, the two young men, right? They know each other, they work together. It's already sort of an invitation came from the first young man to the second one. But I think that as we're expanding and providing this work more to more young people, we'll definitely have an integration circle. Our vision is to have one here and have more of a community way to integrate. But right now it's very individual just because we just have two individuals. So,
yeah.
I think what's so beautiful about, to me, like y'all are the community, but it's just that not a lot of the community has gotten into this work yet.
Exactly.
So I could imagine it still feels kind of lonely for these first couple, but that, yeah, it's like there is the robust kind of community programming there. Which I love that, that they're even now able to like land back in that and this kind of new earth family that they're a part of. Way better than, yeah. perhaps young folk in a similar situation, but they're, they work some job that is not interested in this, and then they just go
Right.
home and are kind of don't
Yeah.
don't have any community at
Right.
all.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we always pride ourselves in, and what I think makes us stand apart, is that we wrap around our young people. We completely wrap around them, no matter what. So the wrap around aspect of our work is already built into the organization. So like Kevin said, it's already there. It's already a natural community, you know?
Mm, so lovely. I want to come and visit you guys
Well,
and
come.
be
Please
part of
do.
it. This is so
Yes.
exciting. And these are the kind of initiations that really move me. And it's just so lovely hearing you have that conversation between you. So just wanted to come back and reiterate on the process for a young person. So I love that it's more about building capacity. So they are building resiliency, they're building stress resistance, all of those things. What I find with the older people, grown-ups coming into the medicine work late, or at least later in their lives, I believe there's a lot at stake, because they built an entire life around these choices, unconscious choices, impulses, and trauma responses. And now there's children, there's businesses, there's partners and social connections. And I find that find it very difficult to just let go and really immerse in this work. I believe I just want to come back again with the young ones. They don't have this, right? They don't have these rooted lives. They don't have much at stake. So it's kind of like guiding them swiftly into the medicine space.
Yeah, definitely.
Really.
They're a lot more open. They're a lot more open, and they're a lot more, yes, they don't have as much at stake, because a lot of them have already lost a lot. You know, a lot of them deal with losing very close people at very young ages, a lot of young people that die. And so they are very connected to the experience of loss. And many of them can't see themselves past their 18th birthday. They just can't even envision it. So for them, there's really no fear of death, and there's no fear of losing anything, and there's none of that going on. So you actually nailed it, Susan, when you said there's not that much at stake. So they have a lot more blind faith, I think.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to mention that is because through our community, it's almost like when an adult comes into the medicine work, it's like they may need to let go of their partner, or some dysfunctional relationship, or they may have communication issues with their children or their parents, or elderly parents in that case, or they may have to, let go of their 20 years of careers and whatever they built, even businesses. So there is this heaviness, and there's this sort of resistance to that kind of work. But I guess with your work, Yana, it's almost like there is none of that. It's more about helping build them roots, build them foundation. It's like almost the other way around.
The opposite way. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, it's always about exposure and opportunity. I mean, that's just really our work at the core, with wrapped around in care, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so wonderful. So, what else could you say about this young man? And also, like, let's say he encountered a real deep grief in the ketamine experience. Has that ever happened to him, or how did he deal with it? Or was he allowing himself to experience any of the grief?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this young man actually lost his best friend to gang violence about a year ago. Very, very close friend. And he has been experiencing grief. But I think that the ketamine space has allowed him to process the grief in a way that he hasn't been able to before, in a constructive, effective way. And I think having Joseph, the therapist, there to really hold that space and take in that grief, and then having us as the support structure behind it. He also has a care manager that's assigned to him here that's really wrapping around him, allows him to process that grief instead of internalize it and have that grief continue to cause trauma and pain. It's now something that can fuel him, and I think like he's really excited about even the possibility of being a practitioner one day, being a therapist like Joseph. Those are things that now he sees possible for himself.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm.
So just want to turn to you, Kevin, now. So what does a practical kind of, how many sessions, what are we talking about? How long, duration? What about the screening process? Let's say if Yana, invited, or at least she is referring someone to you, a young person, do you guys have your own screening, or is there another whole process that they need to go through first?
Yeah, great questions. And I was just really feeling the like ripple effect that we often talk about when, just imagining, if he takes that path and becomes a practitioner himself, just this early stage of what we're doing here. So cool. So I would say, it's typically 6 to 8 sessions is what we're looking at. Sometimes less, sometimes like 3, 4, 5 sessions. The only thing that we're doing at Thank You Life is a financial determination. So we are still letting the ketamine clinics determine who's a good fit for ketamine. Again, like our team has the, we have the experience and credentials to do that, but we're not looking to do that, liability wise, and to also just not step on the toes of the clinics. That's their work. That's their work to do. And even if we made a financial determination, even if we made a more like clinical determination that this person's good, the clinic is still going to want to do that themselves anyway. They're not going to just take our word for it that somebody is good or not. So, when we accept somebody, it's sometimes it's actually most of how it's already been is like through a clinic. So, the clinic is sending someone to us. In this case with New Earth, it was a bit the other way around. And so, accepting this young man, it was like, we accept him through our program. And as long as the clinic thinks he's a good fit for this treatment, then it's all a go. But it's all dependent upon the clinicians really doing their part, which, is like at this point with ketamine is a medical eval and a psych eval by a doctor who, or a nurse practitioner who, someone who has the prescribing power, and really knows what to look for on the medical level of things. And then, the psych part, making sure that, there's no contraindications.
Yeah, makes sense. Is there any cases or typical exclusions that you know of? Maybe that who cannot have this ketamine treatment, for example?
Yeah, I would say the simplest way to say it is anybody with like what we would say like a low ego strength. That can often be somebody experiencing psychotic symptoms or has the potential or history of experiencing psychotic symptoms, often diagnoses like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder sometimes, bipolar with psychotic symptoms, these sorts of things. And that's just a product of these things can kind of shake up our inner world and our sense of self. And so we just want to be careful with people who already seem to have a pretty fragile sense of self that, we want this medicine to kind of deconstruct somebody so that they can reconstruct themselves in a new way. And if somebody doesn't have, whether it's, their own ego strength or just the kind of support in themselves or their lives that's needed to handle this sort of work, then they might not be a good fit for this moment.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for sharing that. I feel like the most people, I mean, the people that need it the most are the ones that really have like mental health, having mental health challenges. And I know that we don't have enough study research to come to any kind of conclusion. However, I really wish that we can have those studies, and I really wish that maybe we can actually serve these medicines under the right circumstances and the conditions and the support to those mentally mentally challenged people, because I just feel like they're just being excluded and they're the ones needed the most. I know it's a sensitive area even to talk about this. I mean, there are so many mums out there would give the world if only the young adult children can have these treatments, because I am fully aware of young people with chronic intrusive thoughts, paranoia, and maybe substance abuse in the past. Maybe Yana, you can say a few things on that one. There's cannabis abuse and different kinds of maybe even hard drugs, and it's really sensitive area, because that's kind of where I just don't know how to even talk about it. And young people have these kind of experiences on the streets, and then there we are. We want to now channel them through a different path, different route to the medicines again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, this young man that we've been putting through this therapy, we had actually been speaking with John Hopkins University to start doing some clinical trials prior to this. And he was one of our candidates, and he was denied. And they denied him because they said he had too much trauma. Right. So, I mean, that's a perfect example right then and there of, folks who really need this the most are getting denied. So I think it's really a fine line. I think we need to be very careful in how we're assessing who should have access.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts about the future of the medicines? Sorry, I'm calling them medicines, but psychedelic substances for our listeners, but I do tend to call them medicines just because I just cannot imagine them used recreationally in the way that, some Western, understanding of them. But yeah, what do you see in the future, Yana?
Oh gosh, I mean, in the future, yes, I think what I would love to see is I would love to see more people with access, and I think that could be possible with more understanding and with more legalization and with more education and more of a mental health approach that, Kevin talked about earlier. And I think that's what we're taking. We're coming out of this era of these medicines being used for partying, quote unquote, and we're stepping into a more therapeutic approach with research behind it, which is really strong and important and powerful. We've actually also been approached by MAPS. Harry's been talking to Rick Doblin about doing studies with our youth, because then we can actually show the real efficacy. And I would love to see this be more of a mainstream way of providing therapy, because it works. It's obvious. I mean, they can go through years and years and years and years of just regular traditional psychotherapy, or they can do 8 ketamine sessions and have some follow-ups, and their life is completely shifted. So what makes most sense? I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. I have a personal experience where I attended a retreat. It was like a higher dose of psilocybin medicine for a group from a therapeutic approach. And in this group session, there were younger people, a lot of them. I think at least 5, 6 of them were in their probably early 20s. And then there was older people, older folks as well. And I think what was really interesting is that older folks were quite worried about the young ones, thinking, okay, they're young, how they're going to contain and hold their space and so on and so forth. But before you know it, they were the one riding and navigating through it the best. They were the one to contain. If anything, they kind of stepped into more of a holding space for the older ones. And that was the moment when I realized, I think I'm always very cautious about talking or promoting psychedelic medicines. It should be for everyone. I don't say that lightly. I try and avoid saying anything like that for harm reduction purposes and being mature about it. But for young people, I definitely think it's the thing. It's the one that's going to really help them shift quicker, just because they're so malleable and open, and they're so much more braver in going into those kind of experiences. So that was my personal experience with young people. So I'm really hopeful, and that they will receive more of these therapies and treatments in the future.
Me too.
Yeah. Kevin, what would you like to say? What would you like to see happening in the future as we're coming to the end of our conversation?
Yeah, I think there's these three big movements happening right now, and I would really love to see all of them kind of come to fruition. And one of them is the more church-based model. One of them is the more, not really like recreational, but this like, hey, I'm an adult, and because I'm an adult, I get to do what I want with my consciousness. And if that's, use psilocybin, that's use psilocybin. And then there's this clinical model that, ketamine is spearheading, the MDMA and psilocybin research is really spearheading. And I think there's room for all three of them. And what I would love to see is over the next 15, 20 years that not only medicine and mental health completely turn on their head and start getting real results that include real healing and not just these band-aid dulling sort of pharmaceutical drugs, but that also society really gets turned on its head in a really potent and powerful and enlightening way.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, both of you. This has been such pleasure for us to have you and share your mission and your experience and learn from you both. It's been really very, very helpful and informative. Thank you again.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, thank you,
One
Susan.
thing I forgot to mention, if your listeners would like to see and read more about us, they can find us on newearthlife.org. New Earth Life, like living life.org.
Wonderful. And Kevin, what about your website?
Yeah, I would say you can find us on thankyoulife.org and also on Instagram at thankyoulife_fund. And y'all are on Instagram
We're on
too.
Instagram too, at New Earth Life.
Wonderful. Brilliant. So
come find us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think
Thank
I
you,
will be really sharing this with our community, and of course, hopefully learning from you guys and modeling something around what you guys are offering here in the UK as well. For our listeners, if you're into any of this kind of work, please get in touch. We'll have your links and your bios in the show notes as well for our listeners to get in touch. And I'm looking forward to maybe inviting you back for part 2 and follow up on some of your work. Wonderful. Thank you so much, both.
Thank you.
And see you on the next one.
Susan.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Bye.
And hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.